Hi, and welcome everybody to the next episode of The Jason's Take On. Today we're going to be talking about product-led customer success. So to get started, just a quick intro. My name is Jason Whitehead. I'm based in Washington, D.C. And for those of you who don't know me, I've spent over 20 years working in customer success, in user adoption, training, and consulting, and work with both buyers of software to help them set up internal success teams and make sure that their internal staff are using and adopting technology year over year. And also work with customer success groups to help build out their strategies and playbooks and develop their teams and all that great stuff. If you have any questions or you'd like any help in any of those areas, please don't hesitate to contact me as well. And before we get started, I'll turn this over to my co-host, Jason Noble in the UK, so he can do his intro. Jason?
Good afternoon, everybody. Good morning to everyone in the US. So as Jason said, I'm the other Jason. I'm Jason Noble, based over here in sunny, or not so sunny, Twickenham in the UK on the other side of the Atlantic. Very similar to Jason. I'm really excited to have everyone listening for this one. We've both been really excited about doing this podcast. And now this is kind of our first one into the second year we've been doing them. So it's fantastic to have a growing audience of listeners as well, which is really exciting. Very similar to Jason, I've been working in the field of customer success or other customer-facing roles in technology organizations for 20, 25 years now. Based over in the UK, based over in Europe, but working with global customers, helping set up, build, create, lead customer-focused functions and businesses, helping them set customer-focused strategies, looking at customer centricity. Currently with an organization called Vinley, who are based in the US, where I'm the VP of Global Customer Success there. So building out the services both in the Europe and in the Global Customer Success team for Vinley. So really exciting time. I think both Jason and I are super passionate about the field of customer success. We're really lucky, as many of you will know, that we've had some great conversations with many of you over the last 12 plus months, but also with some other great people in the field. It's a fantastic area that's growing, and we love the opportunity just to come together to kind of talk through ideas that we've been talking together about, or talking to other leaders in the field about.
Great, thank you, Jason. So for this topic, product-led customer success, we're going to talk a little bit about what it is and why it's important, and really what you can do to help your own product team engage with your customers better, and how product-led customer success can be applied in your company. We're really excited because this is a topic that I think doesn't quite get enough publicity yet, though I know a lot of people are starting to talk about it more and look at ways to do it. So it's really kind of exciting to talk about this. And as you all know, we like to start each of our episodes with a bold challenge question, because we firmly believe that customer success is all about being bold and doing new things to better serve our customers and help grow our organizations as well. So for this month, our bold challenge question is, how can you and your product team think of a bold new approach to product functionality that will increase customer adoption success, reduce time to ROI, and increase value for you and your customers? So putting that out there, and we'll come back to that at the end, but would love to hear your thoughts and comments. So please either, if you have some ideas, put it in the chat window or the Q&A window, or think about it after this and put it out in the LinkedIn group. We would love to hear what your thoughts are. So to get started, Jason, why don't you kick us off with what exactly is product-led success, and why is it important to discuss? Why are we even bringing this topic up?
Yeah, I think you've hit on some key points there, Jason, and I think it is something that's beginning to get more and more traction with organizations, with customers, with vendors as well, understanding what the product should deliver in terms of value and outcomes. And I think in the conversations that we've had, another way to think about it, you can also call it kind of product-enabled success. Much that we've talked about our tech-enabled approach. We want the product to enable that customer success. So as well as leading it, it can enable it. And I think if you look at a lot of organizations, what they do is they use kind of additional services now, customer success automation platforms, campaign tools, support tools, dashboards, but other tools that almost complement the functionality of the product, and build externally what the product should be doing and help fill those gaps in. And I think for me, what product-led or product-enabled success really is about how you build in functionality native to your product and services that really help your customers drive success and recognize the value that they're receiving from the tool, from the software, and also understand what that value is, and make sure that you as the vendor and supplier understand what it is, and that you're presenting it back in the right way so that the customer can see that value and how they're getting it and measuring the value in the platform itself. And I think there are a number of key parts to this. So first of all, there is building the functionality that helps your customers identify what success looks like. So how do they identify what their business outcomes are, what the values they want from the platform are, and talk them through that process, and then identify them and show them, make them visible in the product that you're servicing. Secondly, I think it's building in functionality that helps customers along the way and guides them through the steps that they need to take, both in the product and outside of the product, on that route to success. So looking at things like how do they drive adoption, and even broader topics like organizational change. What do they need to go about to help that? And it's almost like a success plan that's built into the product to help them achieve that success. I think third, it's how they track their actions and see what they've done. So how do they measure what they're doing against that success and that plan? And then fourth and finally, I think it's how do you measure and communicate those results that they're achieving as a result of those actions and link them back to the goals and the outcomes. So yes, we've done this, it fits into the plan, but what have we achieved by doing this? And this is what we're meant to achieve according to the plan. So it's making sure that you make all of those visible in the application. I think that is one of the biggest challenges right now. I think, as I said, a lot of companies are using external products and services to do this, but really the more that we can get built in the product that can help your customers really fulfill their goal of realizing the value, that is really the direction and the journey to product-led success. And I think the overall idea is how do we build into the product as much function as we can that really guides our customers' experience and their successful outcome from the very start of their interaction with us. So don't have it so that they have to go outside of the platform or always have to speak to someone. Really do what we can within the platform. That really covers the what is it we're doing with it. I don't know if you just want to say a few words on why it's important, Jason.
Yeah, I think so, because I agree with everything you said there. And I think, a big thing that I keep finding is a lot of customers, they don't, and you hit on this, they don't really recognize what is value for them and when are they getting it from their application. And it's certainly not right up in front of their face every single day, so they're not really thinking about it. We even worked with one customer recently where their customers, basically, they would set up their application once. It was a very technical product, and then they would never really need to log in because everything was working behind the scenes. So they didn't necessarily know the value they were getting. And I think for a lot of folks, a lot of customers and vendors, they don't really capture right up front with the customer, what is it you're trying to achieve? What does value look like for them, and how do you recognize when you've achieved it? And if people don't understand the value from they're getting, it really makes it harder for them to want to renew and to understand that, yes, this is actually driving success in my business, even if I'm not aware of it. I think another key thing is with so many different stakeholders out there in the B2B world, all of them may have different ideas of what is value and what do we need to do to achieve it. And they don't always communicate well internally on their own. So how can you go through and help sort of drive some of that alignment within the different stakeholders in your customer's organization? Are there things that you can do to show them that this is the value that you guys are looking for, that you've decided, and here's what you need to do to get it? So I think really putting that front and center is a key piece to helping organizations achieve success, because they can also see, oh, we're falling behind our goals. What do we need to do? What's going on with this? And do that with enough lead time that they can take action that's going to have a meaningful impact before they need to make a renewal decision. And I think another big piece that keeps coming up time and time again is simply the scalability of your customer success program. And with product-enabled customer success, if it's done well and done right, it can really help you manage costs and expand your reach. And we talk about a lot of folks say, there are a lot of people today, and they talk, oh, tech touch or tech-enabled touch. And the immediate assumption is, well, how do we do some emails and some messaging? Maybe we do a little in-app communication kind of thing. But really, they're not really thinking of what could the application itself do to help engage the customers and drive their success and really drive that. But I do think it's important to mention here that product-enabled customer success is not a silver bullet, and it's just one component of a customer success program, or it should be one component of a really effective one. And you really need to think about how do we take sort of an all-of-the-above approach to customer success, where we're using see it live people and customer success managers and experts. We're using tech-enabled touch and external tools, and we're using product-enabled touch and product-enabled customer success, and getting the right mix of all of them to really have an effective program. So I think there's a lot of important reasons why this is such a key topic, and that we need to be talking about it.
I think that's so important, and point about the value. We come back to this in a lot of the conversations that we have, Jason, both ourselves, you and I, but also with guests. It's that, how do you understand, both you as a supplier, a vendor, what the value your customers want, but how do you get your customers to understand and be able to articulate what it is, and to be able to get that back into the product? It's almost the holy grail of what we're trying to do here. I think it builds neatly onto this kind of next question here. I mean, what do you think it's, in your experience, what you've seen, that product-led customer success is more geared to B2C? Do you see any good examples of how it's coming about in B2B? Because a lot of the consumer services we've seen do have that investment in products, and you can see them without the need for human interaction. But do you think it'll ever really apply fully to B2B services?
You know, I that's always such a challenging one, because B2B and B2C are so different in many ways. But I do think it can work well for both, but just a little bit differently. You know, almost like how you approach customer success and even the selling process is different, B2B and B2C. So there are a couple important differences, and let's take a look at those for real quick to create some context. You know, I think one of the most important things that people miss is, you know, with B2C, it really is, how do you get an individual to incorporate technology into their individual lives and schedules and activities? You know, we hear all the time, you know, oh, people use Amazon and Netflix, you know, and it just sort of works. And I figured out I don't need to have a big program. I don't need tons of training. I don't need all this stuff. It just works. Why can't your product do that? And I think what people forget is, sure, it works well because you're an individual, and it's less complicated to figure out how one person can address their individual needs without having to coordinate and collaborate with others. Where with B2B, it's all about collaboration, getting groups to work together and getting them to do it in the context of their business or their organization. And that's a much harder problem. You know, you're not just trying to get one person to use the software or product, you're trying to get all the users to adopt it. And you need to get everyone to do it in a way that everyone's using it at the correct point in their workflow, and that they're enabling everyone else to use it too. So there's just a lot of complexities there. And also, when you're operating inside an organization, there are a lot of other factors that affect how people behave and how they use technology. You know, they have other competing priorities. They have bosses that are asking them to do different things. They can't do some of the steps in their tasks if someone else upstream hasn't already put information in the system, put it in correctly, and all those great things. So there's a lot of other dependencies that aren't there with B2C. So I think in the short term, it's going to be a lot easier and faster to incorporate product-led success into B2C, to really start to get people to say, you know, this is what I'm looking for out of the software in my individual life. But I do think, though, as you move through and you look at the B2B world, you know, there's a lot more customizations and personalization that has to go on. And many companies, you know, they customize the applications to meet their needs and their workflow and their users. So you're going to need to think about how you might go and configure product-led customer success to really work in those complex business environments. And it can still be done, but, you know, it's going to be done differently, I think. So, you know, a couple of things that, you know, an example that I think of, you know, if you're working in an organization, if you're a big company, you know, 100,000 employees or even 10,000 employees, and you're using like a CRM, and you might have different goals and progress and outcomes for all of those, the value of the CRM. So you might have different goals if you're in sales or versus service or support, or you might have different goals and versions of success if you're executives versus frontline staff and what that needs to look like. So figuring out how a product-led customer success can help guide the behavior for all those different user groups so that everyone's getting value out of customer success, but they also know what they need to do and how and when to do it, is going to be kind of a challenge. So you'll need to have some sort of ability to customize some of your product-enabled customer success in there, I think. You know, however, there may be other parts of the internal success process that do such a great job that you don't really need to configure them. So, for example, there might be some functionality you can build native into your application around helping people learn to use specific functionality, or putting up some simple dashboards around usage and value that's been created once you have some good metrics around that. So I think there are ways that can be used for both, but I think B2C is going to be easier in the short term, and B2B in the long term, as people figure it out, will definitely help with the scalability. So those are just some of my thoughts. But Jason, let me turn this over to you now. Who do you think, you know, if we are moving towards this product-enabled customer success, or trying to build out new functionality in the product to help drive customer success, who should own managing this? And is it product managers? Is it customer success team? Is it someone else entirely? Where do you think this fits in the organization?
I think it goes back to that old, you know, where does ownership of customer success sit? And I think if you look at a lot of organizations, how they've come about, they quite often say it sits within customer success. There's a silo, there's a department. And we all, you know, in the conversations that we've had, we know that that actually isn't the case. It needs to be owned as a broad organization. Nobody owns the customer as such, but you're all responsible for the success. So I think that same approach applies here. But I think there are two very different scenarios that we need to look at here. One is, if I'm a company starting today and I'm looking at coming into product-led customer success, what do I do? How do I look at where does that sit? Where does the kind of direction, strategy sit around that, and who owns that? But also for companies today that have already got existing services and existing solutions and teams and organizations, what does it mean about their current organization and teams, and where does that sit in terms of ownership? So I think there's two very different questions around this almost. And I think inevitably, if you look at an existing organization, yes, you've got a team of product managers and you have a customer success team, and it may be that the customer success team isn't as mature, it's not been going as long. But the default answer for saying who should own this, maybe someone might think quite obviously, well, it should be product managers to own it. It's a product management function. They're closest to the product, they're closest to the engineers quite often. They've built the roadmap, they've come up with a strategy. I think the challenges with that, I mean, the question I'd ask there is, can product engineers and product managers actually build customer success into the product? You quite often find that they are more process and tool focused and not necessarily as relationship people focused, and don't work, as you said earlier on, Jason, in your point, talking about the collaboration side of it. So they may be missing out. So there are some benefits, but I think there are some risks. And I think the other challenge is, absolutely, your product management team are 100% on the focus. That's what they do. And they've got a level of deep level of comfort and understanding of how the product works. But many users that are using the product don't have that same level of comfort or level of understanding about the product. And they might not care about the product in the same way. They care about doing their day jobs and achieving their outcomes and values that they're meant to be doing. And I think trying to understand the gap there between what I as a user want and expect versus what an engineering team and a product team want to deliver and believe they can deliver, quite often is a big gap to kind of cross. I think your customer success team have a wider view of the more overall business-led customer experience and the whole level of customer interactions, not just around the product. And part of what a customer success function does is help make sure that product-enabled customer success functionality aligns with the rest of the customer success strategy, your playbooks. Of course, your product team also have an overall view of customer experience, or need to have it, but it's not at the same level quite often, and sometimes is missing. And I think ultimately what we're looking at here is another example of convergence, where customer success and product management absolutely need to be working a lot closer together and need to be aligned much more closely. And there are some great examples in businesses I've worked with over recent years where that initially wasn't there, but with the right leadership, the right experience, the right direction coming in, that's something that I've seen a number of businesses put in place quite quickly. And the results, when you get product to align with the customer facing team, your customer success team, the results can be quite spectacular and happen quite quickly. You clearly have got to have the alignment at the management level as well, but when it happens, it works really, really, really well. And I think once you have that alignment, you get that better collaboration within your business, making sure that your customers achieve their goals, their success, and they have a great experience when doing it. And again, it's not so much about the ownership, it's more about that collaboration and working together. And I think product-led customer success is almost a catalyst to help us do that and help us work better together. And I think if you look at enabling product-enabled or product-led customer success in your organization, it's going to have an impact on your development roadmaps, your schedules. You need to get your product managers, your engineering team to start spending time building out product customer success. How do we make it so that is a default, a de facto as to what gets built into the roadmap as opposed to features and functionality? Make sure that's in there and help them change that mind shift so that product-enabled customer success functionality is a priority, and perhaps a bigger priority than the other parts of it. I think it's something that I don't think there is a definitive answer who owns it. I don't think anybody really does. but I think it's all about that convergence of the organization focusing on the customer success, working together. And I think what product-led customer success enables us to do is bring another group of the business, a big group of the business, into that fold to start driving the message to what we're all trying to do. So I'll push the next question to you, Jason. I think it follows on really nicely from this one. If we're talking about kind of ownership here, and I've talked around the collaboration and alignment of the functions, what do you think product-enabled customer success or product-led customer success means for the future role of the customer success managers? Do we still need customer success managers, or how does the role change?
That's such a great question, because I think, by shifting things into the product, shifting things into tech touch, that sort of does leave the question, what's next and what does that look like? And I think the answer is yes, you will absolutely still need customer success managers, but the roles will change, where they spend their time will change, some of the skills they need may evolve a little bit more. So you need to really pay attention to that. And what I mean by that, if the product is delivering better, or if there's a lot of the sort of the low-hanging fruit that you can put into the product itself, some of the questions about how to navigate the tool, or even some basic information on what some of the goals are that we're trying to achieve and how we're doing around that, then there's a need for the person to help along with the process, and that customer success manager will need to do different things. And you may need to have a different relationship with the customer and do different things with them. So, as I'm thinking about that, and I look at where a lot of customer success teams are right now that I talk with, a lot of them still are still having the wrong conversation with their customers. There's still a lot of people who claim they're focused on business outcomes, but when you look at the details of what they talk about, how they conduct their meetings, how they onboard customers, how they do business reviews, they're still talking a lot about feature and function of the product itself, and they're really not talking effectively about the business outcomes. And many of them are certainly not doing it from the very start. And even during the sales process, they're not really focusing the customer on business outcomes. So I think before you go too far down this road, it's important to remember, though, that you really need to get everyone, especially customer success, having the right conversation and the right engagement with your customers before you start to move into product-enabled customer success. Because otherwise, what can happen is you start to run the risk of building out functionality or engaging people on the wrong topics or the wrong things as part of your effort to expand your product-led footprint. So really, I think one of the first things is to make sure you have everyone across your organization having the right conversation with your customer, and talking about business outcomes, thinking about how your customer is experiencing both the product, but also working with your company and how you're engaging them across. So you need to get that done right. Otherwise, you could be shooting yourself in the foot if you move too quickly. But then I also think through, and as I look at this, I think what you'll see is that your customer success managers will need to really be a little bit more of a strategist who can figure out what's the right customer touch points and the right mix of human versus tech-enabled touch versus product-enabled touch to really make the entire experience come together for the customer. And this person really needs to understand process. They need to understand people and behavior and organizational change as well as technology. So they need a more blended skill set to say, how does this all come together? Because again, as we said, no one track is going to get you there all by yourself. And as I start to think about this, in my mind, I've got a vision almost like of a diagram with swim lanes, and up top is sort of what's the end-to-end customer journey and their experience, what we want that to look like, and how do we take them from wherever they are, from a point of first contact to initial success and then ongoing success. That's sort of along the top. And then the different lanes below could be things such as what's human touch, what's product supported touch, what's tech enabled touch, what are our processes, those kind of things. And really trying to figure out how does all of those different aspects come together to really create that desired experience. And I think, being able to envision that, map it out, build it out, and then test it and make sure it's really delivering what you want, that's a very different skill set than being able to have a discussion with a customer about, here's how you set up the tool, here's how you use the tool, here's what you should look for in the tool, those kind of things. So I think that will be a big shift for a lot of folks. And I think, another thing to keep in mind here is that we've said this many times, a lot of buyers of organizations, they're really not savvy about what it takes to achieve success with technology in their organization and to really achieve adoption and to get things, to really use the tool as expected. So many of them, they can get a tool live, but they struggle with those other aspects. And I think as your customer success manager evolves and as the role evolves, they're really going to have to be that agent of change and really more of that consultative approach that can bring all all the things necessary to help customers really be effective at driving success and using these multiple different avenues and touch points. So I think those are just a couple of things to think about. That does mean obviously they're going to change how they spend their time. They're going to change how and when they engage with customers. A simple example that pops to mind too is if within your product you've got a lot of information around here's what you said your goals are, and here's some real-time metrics to show you and dashboards of how you're doing achieving that, and we've put into the product some specific steps and actions that we recommend you take to achieve or exceed your goals. That almost begs the question, well, what does that mean for our business reviews? Do we still need them? Do we need them as often? Are they different now? So I think you'll find a lot of touch points that don't necessarily people hadn't thought about before, and it's going to be up to the customer success team to figure that out. So those are just a couple of my thoughts around that. But Jason, let me shoot back to you, and I see we're almost out of time here, so if people do have thoughts or questions, please go ahead and start to type them in while we ask the last question. And Jason, how do you go ahead and get started with product supported or product-led customer success? Where do people go first if they're interested?
I love it. It's the biggest question to finish on as well. I just picking you up on something you said there, Jess, when you're looking at the kind of executive business reviews, an organization I worked with a few years back, we actually built executive business reviews, whatever you want to, we call them customer value reviews, into the product. And that added a massive amount of value to the customers rather than us having to pull together reports from different sets of data. We had a customer success management platform at the time, but pulled the report information and presentation of that report to the customer in the product. And that really was product-led success. I mean, that's what we're talking about here, to build it in there. But that took a lot of time to do, but really helped everybody, from the customer, from our CSMs, from our execs, to understand what we're delivering. The other point I'd make about the kind of the future of the role of the CSM, I mean, you've covered it really well. And I think one of the key things is the role's not going to go away. What we're going to see is almost an expansion and a maturing of the role to become something even more pivotal to an organization and require a broader set of experience, covering things like change management, management consultancy, a broader knowledge of the business, things like project management. So it's actually a really, really exciting time that we're seeing the roles change so much, and actually products helping us do that, which is really exciting. So I love those conversations there. On to the kind of question about where do you start with this? How do you do this? What's the first thing that we should do? I think there's a million and one different options here when you look at kind of what functionality can we build. I think just some starting points here is how can the product help drive behavior? So you know what your customers are doing with the products, and if you see them going off on the wrong path, or a path that doesn't lead to the outcome that they've identified, can you use in-product prompts, in-product notifications to help drive them back to the right behavior? So are there things that you can do within product to get the customer to look after that desired behavior that they want according to the outcomes they want? So that's one key thing, is look at the usage and how do you model that usage around what the customers actually want. I think the other thing you can do is really take we call it, when we talked about it, a maturity model approach. So try things out. Don't be afraid to test new things within product. See what feedback you get from customers. If you get any feedback, don't feel that you have to send it to everybody at the same time. Some customers like to trial. I'm never a fan of the word beta when it comes to products, but there are some customers that want to try on new services and new features. They might have identified them. It may make more sense to their business cases. So try rolling out new features and new services according to customer feedback, but very specific to certain customers. Get the feedback from them and model what it does for their behavior and how that then can apply to other customers. I think about making some of the functionality optional. Some customers may not want product-led customer success. There are some organizations that still want just the way they work, that high-touch approach, and want to speak to a customer success manager for all things there. So I think what you can do is there are parts of the product success functionality that you might make optional, and you might want the ability to only guide certain users through certain actions, but also be able to turn it off. There are some customers that might not want that guide and might want a more clean product to be able to reach out to people when they want and turn it back on later. So I think the ability to switch on and off certain functionality is key. There are a number of kind of those traditional low-hanging fruit that I think you can do. And I think kind of functionality that you can put in right now, or dashboards you can put in right now. It's all about how do you communicate to your customers what value they're getting today. Put that in meaningful terms to the customer. So if you're looking about a report, if you look at kind of solar panels, look at the number of trees saved, the number of barrels of oil saved, make it so obvious what benefits they're getting from using the product. Put in not just a kind of a dollar value, but also a time. What time savings are they getting? But really take that benefits that they're getting back to what they're getting from the product. So what they're using the product, translate that back to what their outcomes are and present that to them in a dashboard, in a report that's obvious in the product, that's there either showing them on a daily basis, a weekly basis. It can show them trends over time. And I think that's something that's really key. And it's great to see more and more organizations, including very comprehensive, I think they are more reporting engines in products, but it's more of a dashboard. I want that product data to be there at the front that tells me what I'm getting from the product and how neatly I'm aligning to what my values are that I want from the product, and what any gaps there are. And I think you've also, we said earlier on, if you look at how we've historically done QBRs and EBRs and how customers are getting real-time value within the product, if you can make that shift within product, do you actually still need those? I've said on many of these podcasts, I don't like either term. For me, it's all about a customer value review. I'm not reviewing the customer's business. I'm reviewing the value that I'm demonstrating to them. Yes, that has impacts on their bottom line, but it's about that value. And the timing isn't up for me to say, but if I can present real-time feedback of the value the customer's getting at different levels, from their exec stakeholders down to their users, do I still need these meetings that require a big time and effort on both parts? Or do the meetings actually then shift to be something far more just around strategy? So you're talking about the future with your customer, the future direction they're going, the future value, but the day product usage, product value, they can get there from the product. So I think that's something that we are beginning to see, and that's another area that I think is really key to make that investment in. I think as we've both said in a number of points here, you've really got to understand what that value is for your customers. Are your sales team gathering the information about what the value you want and what your customers want? And is that being fed through to the rest of the organization? And how do you present that information into the in-product functionality so that it's visible to the customer too? So the customer almost sees that on a daily basis. Yes, this is what I've said I want. This is the value I'm getting. Then they can track against it and capture that goal into the dashboard and then compare actual outcomes and the results. And I think that real-time comparison there shows them that live, how am I doing against where I thought I would be, is really critical. You can start using surveys within the product, automated survey tools, short questions, really to gauge that information. Some of those values may change over time. So use product to capture that information. As it changes, make sure you reflect that within the product. I think that the whole idea is the more visible we make values, outcomes within the product, the easier we make it for the product to use and work, the more value that it will deliver to the customer. And I think those really are some of the key things there that we can really do to start off. I don't know if you had any other thoughts on that, Jason.
No, I think those are some pretty good ones there for getting started as well. But I do see we have a couple of quick questions here. And I think we can probably take a little time for this. Jason, why don't you start off with the first one? Are there any books you can recommend, or customer success, or specifically on product-led customer success?
There are a lot of number of books that broadly cover the subject, and I'm quite happy to say that there is a guest podcast that Jason and I are going to be doing soon that we will release with a well-known speaker on the topic, that will release some books around that as well, with some links to documents on that. But what we will do in our LinkedIn group, we'll put some links and recommendations to books that both of us have read. We're by no means affiliated with any of them. They're just books that we've read, we know well. I think you are beginning to see a lot more books coming out in the area. It's one to watch for Jason and myself as well. But it is something that there are a lot of good information out there. So yes, we will share it. I'd rather not share it on the call, but we will share that within the LinkedIn group. And as I said, please do keep an eye out for our next guest podcast, which we're really excited about. Jason, let me give the next question back to you. If this is quite a big one, this one. If an organization tries to decide that they want to do this approach and this philosophy and way of working, what tips are there for the process of how you guide clients through the change of what customer success management is and the changing and maturing of the customer success manager role? Do you find that customers embrace it? Are there key talking points that we can help guide them through it? So how do you talk with a customer about the changing role of a CSM?
I'm so glad to see this question, because I think I've seen several CS teams try to evolve their services and their approach, and they don't really think through how they're going to introduce it to existing customers, and it comes back to bite them a little bit. So I think there are a couple of things here. One, with existing customers, to your point, Jason, go through and beta test this, or take it or pilot test it. Say, hey, we're going to work with a small group of customers. We're going to be evolving our CS practices to serve you better. We want to try and do some things, and then pull them aside and let them know what you're going to be doing, and basically letting them know we're going to put into the product some functionality to help enable them to drive their own success more effectively, but also clarify and say, but this means that we will free up time for our customer success team to spend more value-added time with you, or work on harder, more value-added tasks with you. So here's some things that you can look for in the product. Here's some things that you might now come to us that you didn't know you could do, and we'll have resources we didn't have to do that. But we want you to go to the product first for things that are there. And then at the end of this pilot test phase, whatever that may be, sit down and really ask them questions about what worked and what didn't. Get their input, get their feedback, and they will feel highly engaged. And you will also learn a lot about what's working and what doesn't, and where you need to evolve your product-led approach and add in some new functionality. You may learn that some of what you put in there customers just didn't like for whatever reason. But you may also learn some other ideas about how to evolve your human touch customer success approach, and things you can do differently now because you're not spending time on some of the less value-added tasks that maybe you were able to embed into your product. So I think setting some expectations, explaining why you're doing this, and asking for their input, it's really a great way to go, because then you've gotten their take on it as well. I think the other piece then to look through and always keep in mind is after you've completed pilot test, then figure out how you're going to enable this shift for the rest of your organization, your existing customers, and how you're going to explain them why you're doing and what you've done as part of the process to do this, and what they can expect going forward. So there's that part as well too. And then there's the third part, which is after you start to bake in some of this functionality, and you've shifted your services, how do you talk about it and onboard new customers effectively? Because keep in mind, new customers, they may have very different expectations about what is customer success, and their other vendors may have not had it embedded in their product. So they may be expecting more of a higher touch for some things that now you've got embedded in your product. So during that customer onboarding phase, you'll have to explain what customer success means for you, and where the customer should turn to in product versus for a human touch to go through and do what they need to do. So think about those three things: the initial pilot testing and seeing what works, full rollout, and then effectively onboarding new customers who may have experienced something very different with their other customers or with their other vendors.
I think one other thing just to add on to those points, Jason, is that in the organizations I've worked with, the role of a customer success manager has evolved and changed already in the organization from kind of what it was on day one, what customers think it is, what the business thinks it is, to how it is a year down the line, 2 years down the line. Mm-hmm. So I think it's something that organizations and customer success leaders and even customer success managers are quite adept at having conversations around how the roles are changing. And I think this is just a continuation of that and a maturing of what we're doing. So I think it should follow on from it should be a more of a natural way of doing it. You know, the role is continually changing.
Yep, agreed. All right, Jason, we've got one last question here, and it's got a few parts here, so I'll put it out there and see where we can get with it. The question is, I foresee an issue in some companies with ownership and accountability. Do the CSM and product people report up to one person? Are they just jointly accountable? And how do companies make sure there's a person holding the ball when something is overdue to the customer, or the customer reports a problem? So, you know, we talked about the CSM being better a talking person, but I'm trying to think about this more internally. What are some of the internal implications around this?
If I take the first bits there about where they report and jointly accountable, I've not seen an organization yet where product and customer success report the same way. And I've seen a number of different models where customer success report up to sales, they report up to operations, they report up to the CEO. Product typically reports up to your CTO or your CIO even. But I've not seen any examples yet where the two report to the same place. Now, I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing, and I don't think it's a need. Are they just jointly accountable? I think yes. And I think one of the key things is making sure that the KPIs, the OKRs, the objectives, however you run your business, are for both groups are customer focused and filtered down. So as a business, your goals are all understood, what you're delivering for the customer. You've got customer success embedded into your business goals, and all of your team's goals should also have that same level of customer success. So it's not that customer success is a separate department with being the only one with customer focused goals. Not at all. All of the teams in the business have to have goals and numbers that focus on what are we delivering to the customer. So I've seen again businesses go through this shift where products start off with goals more around delivering features and versions and roadmaps, shift completely to being able to impact things like net promoter score, being able to impact things like net revenue retention, being able to impact things like customer satisfaction. I think they are more customer focused goals. So I think what you need to do is make sure that all the different teams have goals that are aligned to the customer, and all of those goals feed back into what the business level objectives are. And then I think if you do that and your management team again are aligned to the customer, and quite often it is your CS leader who is fighting the corner for the customer, but as long as that alignment is starting, it's about making sure the two different teams are working closer and closer together. I want my sales team to have that same alignment around customers and feedback they get. I want the support team to have the same thing. So I don't think where they report matters as such. As I said, I've yet to see an organization where product and CS report the same way. They may be out there. I might just not have seen one, but I don't think it matters. And I think it's more about being jointly accountable and sharing those goals. On the point about where companies make sure that the person holding a ball where something's overdue or a customer reports a problem, I think you've still got to take accountability for that. So if a customer reports a problem, where's it coming? It should be coming in through support. If it's a product issue, it should come in through the normal channels there. And what I want to make sure is that we've got ownership and accountability there so that the relevant teams step in and resolve that problem.
Yep.
Don't just drop the ball. And I think that's really important there. So everybody internally is a customer person. I think, again, this goes to the ethos of all the different teams. You need to think on behalf of a customer. If I'm rolling out this feature, what does this do for a customer? If a customer phones up because something's broken, if they phone up support, something's not working, what's the impact for the customer? So put what is it? It's you walk in the shoes of your customer. Really that is so critical. And there are a lot of organizations, and this is something that I would really strongly recommend, is walk in the shoes of your customer. And I think it's an organization like Intuit, right from the CEO down. What they do is they have some across the organization on an annual basis. Everybody steps into the shoes of a customer and puts themselves in as if they were a customer. Goes through a support experience, goes through a sales experience, really embed yourself. And I think that is so critical. And even make sure you do that from an exec level. Get your execs to be a customer for a day. What do they think about the interactions? And I think you can then get that more customer focused way of doing it. I don't know if there's anything you wanted to add on to that, Jace.
Yeah, I think a couple of things that jump for me is that there will be issues getting internal alignment down, especially during a transition. And I think for current companies, it will be a little bit harder, but keep in mind that if you're asking as well your product team to build out some of this functionality, that also implies that there will be some other things on their roadmap that will need to shift, and that you're prioritizing product-led customer success capabilities be built over some new features and functions, that you need to make sure that executives and everyone understand that. But I think what's also nice about that is there's probably no better way to demonstrate to your internal team the value of customer success and the value of making sure customers achieve their outcomes than to say, we're going to delay building other features and functions because this is more important. And I think if you've got a leadership team and a CEO that so values the customer input and the customer success that they say, yep, we're going to put development resources to this, that sends a big message across the entire organization. And, I suspect that there are a lot of organizations out there that are not ready for that level of commitment yet. I think there's still a lot of vendors out there that truly don't understand what customer success is and haven't figured out how to embrace it across their entire organization. I think that needs to happen first. But I think once you get there, it'll be great. So it'll also be interesting to see what happens in the future. And I know we'll be talking about this some in future podcasts around the idea of what does a new startup look like 5 years from now, when the idea of product-led customer success is not a new idea, but just a given that you need to have it. So just a couple of thoughts there. So with that as an end, let me recap our bold challenge question. What we said at the beginning is, how can you and your product team think of bold new approaches to product functionality that will increase customer adoption success, reduce time to ROI, and increase value for you and your customers? So we'd really love to know your thoughts and comments. So please put them in the LinkedIn group. We'd love to hear that. And hope everyone can join us next month when we will be talking about building out a proactive customer success team and processes. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. Really hope you enjoy this. We'd love your comments. If you did like this, please go ahead and share it on your social media platform of your choice and give us a quick like where replays are, and we'd love to hear that. Jason, anything else you want to add?
No, thank you very much, everyone. As you said, this is kind of first podcast of us for our second year. So great to have so many people listening, really excited. Hope you've enjoyed the chat, and we're kind of planning what we're doing for next year. So do watch this space. And as I said on the points earlier on, we have a very exciting guest podcast that we're going to release over the coming weeks. So please do keep an eye out for that as well. But thank you very much, everybody.